my most successful, second most successful one is in the like 70 would be a good day for that one. But this one, like over the past week or so, it's had several 1,500 play days. Um,
Even he's blowing my mind even when I thought I knew the number. That is so amazing.
I'll beat my drum for you. I'll sing my song for you. I'll clap my hands to the beat that transforms into.
How has publishing your first book been? Like, what is it? What you thought it would be? Is it, are you have hopes for it? Or how are you thinking about that now a little over 2 years past that time?
so yeah, I don't know that I had many expectations going into it. Uh, it was pretty pure in its intention, I think. I just had a certain like inspiration for creating this project initially based on just the title phrase was the first thing that came to me in a certain moment, and then it kind of fleshed itself out as to what the project was. Um, so I'd say that it was mainly complete just in bringing it to tangible form. Uh, I would say maybe I imagine in any sort of creative pursuit or project, the ego gets involved one way or another. And so I'd say my expectations maybe that happened internally in the creation of the project as it relates to uh, the receiving of the book or um, it maybe achieving some sort of acclaim or something like that, or the number of people that be buying it was less than what I maybe wished it would be, which I imagine probably anybody that writes a book might have some dream, whether they admit it or not, of it becoming this like huge success somehow. Uh, so I'd say, that was humbling in a way, although there's I'm amazed that the number of people that have my book have this book. I would say it would be complete even if like nobody had it, or just a handful of people had it. So in a certain way, it was like totally complete. But then in another way, maybe less than I expected, uh, which has created a new maybe perspective as I move into this next book. I'm almost done with my second book now that I'm working on, and I think even more so, I've released any sort of expectation or even really concern about the reader in certain ways, and just made it. Although I'm happy with the first one being a pure project, I would say this one maybe even more so. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question, but there's a couple of things that stand out to me as it relates to that project in particular.
It feels like you have to like live the essence of that book, right? The will to do nothing, like the will to actually just allow to not be focused on how much it's going to do or how much it's going to sell, but actually just allowing what it wants to be, doing it for its own sake, allowing what it wants to be to unfold. And I think, well, I want to ask you about this too, because it was something that I know at least me, Darius, and Jessica, we're all in a little group, so it's insider insider language for those that are listening. Darius Bashar and Jessica Amos. I talk about for me when I wrote my first book, and I still have this dream, and I think it's like a fun North Star, regardless of if it would ever come to fruition. But the dream of being on Oprah's couch, and I know I've heard so many people in this world want that dream, but when I was putting that into some copy that I was working on, and both you and Saqib Rizvi said like, "Oh, that didn't resonate with me. Like that's not a dream for you all." And I'd just be curious to hear you if there's anything more to say about that. But like, what does critically acclaimed author look like for you then if it's not Oprah's couch?
Yeah, that's a good question too. There's probably something there about, and I'm sure ego is involved on some level here too, but some identification with like under the radar kind of stuff, or like maybe I might be inclined to not like something if it's incredibly popular, or maybe have an aversion to it, or think that that's probably not really art or something like that, which I can acknowledge is my own like a bias. Like I didn't read Eckhart Tolle or Tolle for a long time because he's like this incredibly popular figure, and I'm sure there are other people like that still that I've like avoided being exposed to their stuff just because it's so popular and like everybody references it. But that also means that it's of a certain value or a certain quality. At a certain point, I had heard Eckhart in particular referenced just enough times where I was like, just you should have at least read this. And I really liked it. I've read a couple of his books now, and I really like what has to say. So I think that's probably a part of it for me. And maybe also attached to I think my deepest desire is to be as pure of an artist, quote unquote, as possible. And so maybe I just have a vision of like the real artist, wouldn't be the one that is on Oprah's couch but again, that's not necessarily true. But there's some story I think that's there for me. But I can say it isn't something that I aspire to or wish for. And at the same time, if that happened, of course, I would be like so happy. So maybe I'm also protecting myself in that way by saying that I don't want that, because it's less of a letdown that it's just not a reality.
You speak to, I'm curious if you've ever done any research on the Enneagram, but what you're saying is so typical fixation for the Enneagram 4, which is like the individualist, and you kind of defined the Enneagram 4 in a sentence. And I have a friend who's an Enneagram 4, and she would say the same thing, that would say, like, once it's for everyone, it's automatically saying it's not for me. Like, the once you're saying, like, this is the popular thing, like, that is my sign that I'm going the other way. And so I totally understand that, and that would make a lot of sense. So Oprah, Charles is not available, so you can call me or Darius or no, just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Charles, since we've done a podcast before, and also when I do podcasts with friends that we're kind of exploring, like, it's fun to actually not do the preparation that I typically do. But I was thinking, I was like, well, what's my introduction for Charles, which we didn't do. Like, what do I say he is? How do I define him? And so I just decided to Google search your name and just see what
Hmm.
comes up first. And Charles Freligh, underneath that is musical artist.
Oh,
And I don't
interesting.
know if it's it's because you have some things on Spotify, or I don't know where that generates from. And then if you go to maybe an overview, I think this is maybe coming from your book, where it explains obtaining your PhD in clinical psychology, years of experience working therapeutically with individuals and groups. His work is rooted in the healing impact of presence. But honestly, I think artist, from what I experience of you, really hits more on top of it. So how are you defining? And I know this is a paradox to define yourself, and I know you try to not define yourself in some lenses, but how are you saying or defining or talking about what you're doing nowadays, or is it changing? Is it evolving?
Yeah. That's really cool too, that's what came up. That makes me happy. Um, I'd imagine there's, yeah, probably related to me having content on Spotify, I would guess, or on the music streaming platforms. And then, so this maybe relates to your question of like the evolution of how I maybe identify myself professionally or otherwise. Uh, at a certain, maybe I've shared this story with you before, but I remember one time I was sitting in my car and I was listening to, I think it's a Mozart music piece. I can't remember the name of it, Mozart or Bach, one of those two. But it was like I was in a period of listening to this particular piece a lot, and it just has this really kind of strong flourish and crescendo, like it can get me into this sort of emotional feeling. And I was listening to it in the car, and I remember just being really struck by an internal phrase of like, "I am an artist," and that feeling really, really true and closer than any other like word that I have used in the past. to describe myself, because I would, all the other words that I might have used never really resonated. It's just like, this is what I'm doing, or you know, I have my PhD in clinical psychology, but I was never like, I was pursuing a certain thing, but it never really felt personally meaningful to me or important to me to be like a doctoral student or a psychologist even, or anything like that. That feels way more distant. Um, Although I can play those roles, like it feels pretty distant to who I actually am. Uh, and maybe I felt like who I really am, maybe it couldn't match up with how I would identify professionally or in terms of my quote unquote career. But I think that word fits the best, even though it's kind of vague. Like, what do you mean by that? And it begs a description. But it's kind of nice to give myself permission to not have to give a description, because I can certainly use other words that people can understand. I guess that's an art form too. But if I was to call myself therapist, it doesn't feel right, even though I play that kind of role. So yeah, artist became a thing several years ago. And then I would say, even though this is probably another one of those Enneagram 4 things, although I'm not aware of that, but does sound like me. The term manifestation, I have some aversion to that because it's such like a popular phenomenon, and I maybe have some aversion to my understanding of what it might mean, of like trying to get something manifest $1 million or something like that. But I would say it seems like maybe something like manifestation has been happening with this artist label. Like at a certain point, I was kind of just internally agreeing with that. Like, yeah, I am an artist, and I don't even need proof for it, but that's just what I am. And then at a certain point, I decided to make it like the top thing on my website, where like on my website, it's Charles Freligh, PhD, which is another label role thing, although it's also a door opener, so I do use it. But then below that, I have a couple titles of like, these are things that I do. Individual guide, that's kind of my term for therapist, writer, a couple other things. And at a certain point, I was like, I would like to put artist as the first thing. And just something about that felt kind of meaningful to me, even though it just takes, I think it takes the person to my Instagram page where I'll like put some art sometimes, or just things randomly, and I have maybe a couple hundred followers on there. But that felt meaningful to me to do that. And I think I've done a variety of, I started taking a painting class, and I've been taking those pretty consistently, drawing as well, and painting. And like I've been putting energy, I guess, into this identity as artist. And then I feel like it's just kind of been happening that I increasingly am an artist, or like it's just kind of making its way tangibly into my life and into my work. It was nice. I had an initial consultation with a client maybe a month ago. And I think because of this, like I put artist as the first title on my website, and maybe you can like see in my space, there's some art stuff. When they came on, they were like, yeah, I was drawn to you because you're an artist too. And I was like, oh, that felt like internally, like that felt really nice, like for you to see me as that, or maybe there's something about my identifying as that has been showing like externally. So yeah, artist is the closest that I can say, although I probably still wouldn't say that if I was at a party or something and someone asked me what I do. Although maybe I should just be like artist, and they could ask further if they wanted to. But yeah, something about artists just feels, even though again, like I do resist labels, because ultimately they can't capture the truth, but you can use them to try to get close to it. So I think for me, artist just feels the closest to whatever it is that I'm doing here.
I'd love to hear how you might help someone come to, if it is something you could help someone with, because when you're saying this, I'm reflecting on my own experiences with, I would say maybe the more so writer Artist does really resonate. This is the art and business of meditation. I consider myself a meditation artist in many ways, as we've talked about before. But there's something about writer and speaker where I've just had moments of like, yes, this is what
Mm.
I'm here to do in some sense. Something with words, something with voice, something with language, that just feels so true. And sometimes when I'm not, I notice myself when and it's been sometimes the balance and interesting flex of this podcast is when I also have a part of me that feels, and there's a mix of ego. I know I've been so, and you can get so ego swept up into the term entrepreneur. Like um, it's so aggrandizing. It's self-aggrandizing in some ways. It's so like has and it's empowering. Like, okay, I am, I create businesses, or I create, which creates resources, which creates money, which is which is a lot of energy. So, I come from a line, at least in my one side of my family, of small business owners, entrepreneurs, in a certain blue collar sense. And so like I really resonate with that too. But I think when I'm really feeling in spirit and inspired, it is more in that kind of writer, speaker, creator sort of sense. And so I'm always
Mm.
just balancing, like, I run a mastermind group that's more business focused, but how do I bring that essence to this, right? How do I bring, what does that look like that's different? Because it's not a traditional business mastermind. It's not a traditional business group. People are in there not because necessarily they're getting business advice, although that comes from it, but there's an essence and an energy that is creative. Um, so all that to say, if someone's listening to this that's still trying to figure out, like, what is that thing? What is that word? Because words are limiting and they can be powerful, and they can help us focus, they can help us ground, they can help us manifest in some ways. Like, to in order to write my book, I had to see myself as a writer. Like, and all I had to do to be a writer was actually just write, and all I had to do to be an author was to publish that thing. And so,
Mhm.
um, those words, when embodied, right, can really help things come into fruition, which is maybe what you're kind of noting at. And I have similar judgments towards how manifestation is used too, as you. So I understand the
Mhm.
energy around that. But I'm curious if there's anything that you would, ideas that come to me, and then maybe that'll help you think of it. If ideas that come to me would be like, meditating on those words and just seeing how they resonate inside of you, and trying on different things and listening. I don't know. It sounds like you just had a moment of like this came through, and so maybe it's hard to necessarily create that for someone. But
Yeah, it reminds me of something I did with a client one time where they were trying to get kind of clear on what it is they actually do or how they identify at the core of everything, because they do a couple different things professionally. But yeah, we did just sort of like I like using imagery, or just kind of whatever imagery might come to you as you think about something, using words, but maybe allowing words to exist in like a spatial or just imagery based space in your mind. And I mean, this is kind of simple and probably is just like a technique that people use. But we're envisioning like a web extending out from, or just like circles extending out from a central circle. Like there's a circle in the very center of your being, and then there are circles that expand outward. And we were trying to like get a sense of what is it that's in the very center circle. And it was kind of cool for him because what came up in the center, it was more just a way of being, as opposed to a particular label or, artist. It's kind of both, but that's more like a specific kind of role. But what came up for him that I thought was quite nice was explorer. And like that felt the most true to him. And then he's like in consulting, and he also does coaching, and there's a variety of different professional things that he does, but he felt like, at the very center was explorer. And he was like, yeah, that feels right. Because there's something cool about too. It's like the body can tell you if the word is right or if it gets like close or closest to who you actually are. So that could be something. It's like, what is that word with no limitations whatsoever? And maybe it's even something like symbolic, or that doesn't even have to necessarily make sense. It could be a color or something like that. It's just like, that's it, at the center of everything. That's what I feel like. And then that can inform maybe the different roles you play. And it could be interesting, even if someone did this on paper, like there's something in the center, and then yeah, this role that I play is like kind of out here, this one's really close to it, this, like, they're all just, and maybe this one feels like it's on the right side, this feels like it's on the left side, or this one's even outside of all the circles, but it's still something that I do. So that could be one that I think of. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's simple and just easy, I think, for everyone listening to just like grasp. And as you were saying it, it was a reminder for me of like, wait a second, Lou, no, you're not, it's not writer, speaker, teacher, leader. It's really never been teacher, to be honest, but writer, speaker, whatever that I just said before. But you're helping me crystallize how they all fit together with what I'm doing right now. And that is, my word is like inspirador, like, or inspire. Like, I'm
Mm.
here through what I'm doing to inspire, whether that's podcast host, whether that's the mastermind, whether that's whatever I'm doing, whatever flavor it ends up taking at this juncture in time. And I'm sure it'll continue to unfold as we all do, that it's to inspire, right? It's to help,
Mm.
to help someone see something of themselves, to help someone, remind them something of themselves, of what could be motivating or connective or insightful for them to take on in their journey. So thanks for just reminding me of that word of like, no, that's what I hope to do on this podcast. And I've been fortunate. I been getting some messages because I asked for it on a recent podcast episode of like, hey, is anyone listening to this?
Yeah.
And I've gotten some really beautiful messages that remind me of like that intention of no, this is inspiring teachers and guides out there to do their work with a greater, which is one, just do their work, and hopefully to do it with a greater love and intention and integrity. So thanks for clarifying that for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and just one thing to add to that too, that I feel like has been valuable for me in terms of like the artist label, but it could be any label, is noticing the presence of the, what you might call the inner critic, or whatever it is that immediately comes in and says, no, you're not that, like, or you couldn't be that, or something like that. Because I realize that's there for artists. It's like, that's not something that you are, or that you can be. You need, first of all, like, you're not one of those people, and then second of all, like, you need proof for that. Like, you need that, you need the acclaim and success, like the Oprah's couch. You need the book that is on some sort of bestseller list or something like that, to be able to say that you're an artist or something. So I might add to, in that kind of practice, if that's something someone wants to clarify for themselves, to notice the presence of that thing and really try to let that get out of the way, to help you be able to just pick what is the most pure thing. Like for me, just to remove that, I can say artist because that's just what feels right, and then that has a way of extending out into maybe tangible things, but that's secondary to just how I feel at the center of everything. So
I would say if that voice shows up, that's probably even a sign that might be the thing, right? So it's
sure.
like noticing that there's probably some fear around being this thing. There's some imposter syndrome because you care, because it seems like not a stretch, but it's like, really me? Like, no, me? Like there's almost like a, I guess psychologically you might call it like a golden shadow. Like there's something that we're not quite, like we feel in ourselves so deeply, and we maybe see it in others, but we're not recognizing it in ourselves for whatever reason, because it might feel too too big, or too special or too beautiful. I don't know. There's something that's like we're like resisting in that. And so the
Yeah.
fact that if you are noticing that come up, I would even say like, okay, good. Like I think unfolding into our dreams, and this is curious of like when where the dreams come from. What are true dreams, or what are cultural dreams that we've been fed, right? I would even say go so far as to say Oprah, right, is pretty much like a cultural thing. Without, what is the essence of that type of dream? And I think and I've heard this before. I'm not the first person to say this, but there's some level of that they should scare us a little bit, that they should like, make us a little bit on our toes, because that is us moving more into our aliveness. And I think it's really our aliveness, as um, I think Joseph Campbell has said, it's not the meaning of life that we're seeking, it's the experience of being alive. And that's what's infectious, is when someone's fully in their spirit and aliveness. It's so magnetizing and powerful, and it's scary to get there. It's like we have to go on that hero's journey to really realize and embody that. And I can even think of myself, gosh, 8, 9 years ago, beginning writing my first book, and how big that looked to me, like how like up here that seemed to do, and how I looked at anyone who had done it like just totally above me. It seemed so out of bounds, and now to have done it and have a way different perspective on it and be a little further on the journey, it's like, oh, actually, yeah, that's not, it's there's so much power that comes from going through those big hurdles, and yeah, creating or stepping into roles that we might be scared to step into.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if, see if you can make sense of this thought, because I haven't fully yet. Um, but there's something about the resistance to allowing that to really become alive, uh, that is, maybe it's the other side of this, the inner critic that's like protecting us in some way, because it can, there, even if it's maybe difficult and challenging, I do think there's something kind of really appealing about the hope for that someday, maybe like to become an artist or to become a writer or to have a book or something, not actually to get there, but to have it as a thing like that I could do, or I'm on the way to doing, versus I do think there might be certain ways in which it could be a real, like a letdown, uh, when you do that, even if it's in many ways, it's like it's quite liberating and freeing, but then it's like, well, is this it, or what now, as opposed to like the hope that could be attached to, oh, if I write this book, get on Oprah's couch and all these things, it can feel so big, versus like, okay, I've done it, I am a writer or I am an artist, but things aren't really maybe even that different now. So there could be something that other thing is like protecting us from, in terms of embracing that. I'm reading a book that it's full of, are you familiar with Kurt Vonnegut? Yeah.
Yes.
Slaughterhouse-Five, and like, actually haven't read him, but I've been like drawn to him in some, I don't know if you have artists like that or writers or people, but just like they've popped up in your life again and again. And so now I've ordered Slaughterhouse-Five because I'm reading this book that I just found in a bookstore. It's Kurt Vonnegut's advice on writing, which has a cool title. It's Pity the Reader, which is kind of nice. And the message that I've gleaned from that so far is that you're asking quite a lot of a person to actually read a book. So like care for them, and on a certain level pity them and their experience that is like actually quite difficult to sit through an entire book and read it. But what he said, he described after writing Slaughterhouse-Five, which was this like thing he had worked on, I think for over 20 years or something. It was like this project that was kind of at the core of what he wanted to do professionally. And then he finally did it, and it became this huge success. And then he described his experience as like postpartum depression, which I think is a cool way of putting it, because like, it's this now what feeling, I've done it, and everything might feel a little bit less meaningful uh, when there's not this hope attached to what life could become like when I have embraced this fully. So I was just wondering if that like could be a part of the that other voice too that says, no, you're not that. It's actually trying to protect you maybe from that experience.
Interesting. It's such a common experience, and in some ways there's a part of me that really wants that experience. Like it wants the profound sadness of the day after Oprah interview to be like,
Mhm.
wow, is that
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
preparing for that, like knowing that that was what people say, right? Because it's not, I'm not deluding myself that anything's going to complete me. And I think that's knowing that, like going into these things knowing that. And I think David White, who has been talking about a lot, I don't know if you know the poet and writer David White.
yeah.
He's he's someone, and he's been on a lot of kind of popular podcasts recently, but there I've had a few of his books in the past, and recently reading another one of his books right now. And I love how he talks about work. It really resonates with how he talks about like vocation and work. But he's been talking a lot about kind of the anti Eckhart Tolle. He's actually been talking about the
Hmm.
importance of past and future, and how like we've kind of lost touch with like trying to be in the now. And he's been a Zen meditator for a long time, so he can
Yeah,
like he's coming at this from the inside in a certain way.
yeah.
And I like how he talks about for the future when he talks about desire. And this is another word that we can either get so attached to, like, and there's some people in our world that are just like, just go for your desires. And it's all about what you want, quote unquote. And this can be where that kind of toxic manifestation, maybe that's where the toxic manifestation culture towards how he frames desire as it's coming from Latin desidere, which means of the stars. And a desire was almost like a directional path, just as the stars can be directional paths. And so when you have a desire, it's like it's not if it's true, right? And you can it's coming from the stars, and it's here to orient you in your life, to
Hmm.
give you direction that is inherently like we need to, have somewhere we're directing ourselves, and who knows why it's being directed in this area now, and who knows what the next desire that's going to come. But I've always liked how he framed that. And so it's like really honoring your desires, not as, oh, I'm being selfish about what I want, but actually we have, it's so hard. Like we're all asking ourselves all the time, like, am I okay? How do I be okay? Like, what is the most okay that I can be? How do I direct my life in a way that I can add to the okayness, or hopefully the joy and the love and all the good things? And a desire, a dream, another way to maybe use that word, helps us to orient. It gives us direction. And that's purpose. Like it doesn't matter one thing that we're doing. Once we have direction, we can have purpose in so many things, like so many things that I think the daily, and I know you're big on this as you write about in your book of just the daily rituals and habits when done purposefully and directively, like can be super meaningful on their own. And I
Hmm.
think just to try to tie a knot on this whole thing, if you're feeling like your life is going to be completed when you reach your pinnacle, whether it's your, Super Bowl's coming up, so maybe it's winning the Super Bowl or it's being on Oprah. Like the difference is it meaningful as you're doing it? Like, is it worth doing it are you enjoying it as you're doing it versus I need to do that thing in order to make it. And
Yeah.
it's, I love just to connect the sports to this. Aaron Rodgers, who's kind of he's been kind of public about his ayahuasca ceremonies, and just kind of just being on more podcasts that are in the realm of like things that we're into. So I've been like a huge Aaron Rodgers fan, and he's someone who got to win a Super Bowl in his like second season or one of his first seasons starting, and had that profound low. And he this year, I just love, because no one's talking like this in sports, but this year the Jets just had a completely disappointment of a year, and people keep asking Aaron Rodgers like, hey, how tough was this year? Was this year like the most difficult year of your career? And he's like, honestly, this is one of the best years of my life. Like because it's not he's because he's explaining like, hey, it's not about, yeah, winning the Super Bowl is where we're aiming to, but the relationships, the process, right? He's just a lover of the process. That it's like, yeah, we got to enjoy this time with each other and go through the heartache together as this band of brothers, and go through some joys and go through all that together. That is, in essence, meaningfulness on its own. And then I just to keep the football going, but then I watched uh, the Eagles game yesterday, and Saquon Barkley at the end, who's the running back who's having one of the greatest seasons of all time, talk about not celebrating this too much because they're focused on the Super Bowl, and that's going to get applauded in the culture, right? To say yes, you got to go. It's all about winning the Super Bowl. And of course, Saquon hasn't won it, so he can't know that it's maybe not all of it, but it's just kind of a contrasting view to, I think, someone who has hit the pinnacle, realized it's not what you think, and is understanding that he actually still loves the process of what he's doing. So I don't know if I got too far, went too far to left field with
Yeah,
the
no, it makes a
football,
lot of sense.
but in yeah, I hope
Yeah,
it resonates with some.
I watched the Aaron Rodgers documentary thing on Netflix recently, the Enigma, actually, just like this past week. It was super interesting, but that was making just made me think of, I guess, a continuum of desire. Maybe there's a pure side of the continuum and a less pure side of the continuum, and maybe the less pure is more quote unquote ego driven, or it's trying to complete you, or it's like, well, once I get that, then things will be different. Then it's more like reaching, grabbing kind of, versus a more pure side, which is more of a, like, it's coming out of you, or it's expressing something through you. That it reminds me of, and you mentioned Zen too, that I've been working on this Zen based project for almost a year now. And along with that came a fair amount of, there's my own experiences, but I just wanted to reread things, read new things as well, and like just kind of research in the creation of the project. And I came across something that I hadn't heard of before, but I thought was quite nice, that at least in terms of what I've read, the Buddha made a distinction between two different types of desire, which is helpful, I think, because one might think of Buddhism as like remove all desire, and that's the key. But it was helpful to see this distinction between what he called Trishna and Virya. Have you heard of those?
No.
Yeah. So this Trishna is like maybe that kind of the impure side of the continuum of desire, which is, and it can be translated as thirst. It's like this kind of grabbing, trying to satiate something that is not internally satiated thing. And that is a never-ending vicious circle of suffering, like the samsara, just repeating the suffering by trying to get something that you don't already have. So Trishna, but then Virya can be translated as like vigor. And my understanding of that type of desire is it's like it's the desire to wake up, or like to be who you really are. And so maybe it's like, you're writing, it could be for either reason. Like it could be for Trishna, it's like, because I want people to like me. I want me to like me. I want something to show, to say, look, I'm a success. Or it's like, I'm writing because that just feels like I have to do that. Or it's just something more pure. It's like, there's something I want to say, something I want to express, that it's like, it's more connected to just who I really feel that I am. Or I want to paint because that just feels right, or whatever it might be. So that for me is a helpful distinction too, as one might consider or think about their own desires. Like, is it coming from the desire to awaken, or like really be alive, really be who you are? Or is it coming from something that feels more like a thirst, like ego thing, where you're trying to get something that maybe isn't you, or you're trying to, shield who you feel you really are by these things. So I thought that was cool, because I actually hadn't heard of that, and it went in the face of what I might have assumed about Buddhism, or like about the Buddhist perspective, where kind of all desire is something to release, but that there might be this pretty pure form, like what you're describing, um, of desire.
You're connecting a difference between what you want to do versus what you can't not do.
Mm,
Like where it's almost like you're not quite right, or you're not feeling whole, or you're not and there might be like an oh shit moment too. It's like like similar to what we were talking about before, that fear. It's like I have to do that. Like it's not going to be easy. Like this is not an easy task, but it's my task to show up in this way. And
mm,
all right, like that, that is, christening is the word that's coming to me, but it's like this is the role I'm here to play, and it's, can I step up? Like, can that there's some power that the universe has bestowed uniquely to me, uniquely to you, uniquely to everyone listening, and it's asking, can are we here to say yes to it? And that's speaks to, again, the hero's journey, right? The first part of the hero's journey is refusing the call, being like, no, that's too much. But
yeah.
then it coming again and being like, no, I have to go on this. I don't exactly know why, but this is what life is asking.
Yeah.
Charles, I know it's, I love that. I know what I thought we were going to talk about most of the time, and totally not what we talked about most of the time, which is super fun. I want to do that more on interviews. It's really, I'm just making this connection out loud because I'm wondering if other people can resonate, maybe if they do podcasts or do any kind of speaking. But there has been moments earlier on in this conversation where, Charles, you're talking, and then there's this part of me that's like, I don't know if you stop talking what question I would ask next. Next. But that feeling, noticing that feeling where in the past I might shut down and get like, there's like a fear of, I need to know where this is going, or he's going to sit, not talk, and then I'm not going to know where to take this. But of actually being, well, like actually celebrating that feeling of like, I have no idea where this, this is going to go.
Yeah.
And can I be comfortable in what I once thought was a feeling I'm not supposed to have? Like, I think what, and this is literally crystallizing on as we're speaking here, Charles. So thank you for this.
Yeah.
Is that I think in sometimes the over preparedness that I do in other places or even on podcasts is like, I'm not trying to feel that feeling. I don't want to feel that feeling of uncertainty in directing. But yeah, they're just interesting, and like, can that be actually what I'm looking for? Can I kind of have more of that edge of, wow, don't exactly know where this is going to go, but can I stay centered and trust that, the right words or the right thing will show up?
Right. Yeah, because as loud as that voice becomes, the less receptive you will be to what could be the next question, which might so obviously present itself, as long as you're willing to just remain, I have no idea where this is going, but let me just kind of be as present as possible with what's here and trust that it will be fine. Um, Even if I don't have something to say.
Which is so, and there's another thing that's connecting today, is this is so easy for me to do that if I'm in a coaching context with someone, like one on one. Like that is the essence of, in a lot of the things I'm coaching. I'm going to have a sense of where we're going, but I'm really not trying to wait for the next thing to say. I'm really trying to be listening and
Mhm.
trusting. But when there's an audience, like when there feels like there's someone waiting for something, totally different experience for me.
Yeah.
So you're working on your Zen course. I want to note another huge project you did since the last book that you wrote, and kind of speak to its success, because I don't know everyone's numbers on Insight Timer, but I know yours and I know mine. And your course is just absolutely crushing it. And that's the Tao Te Ching Mastery, which was, I think, 88 or 87-day course.
83 days.
83. I don't know where
Yeah.
I got this 7 or 8. 83. Nonetheless, impressive. And now you're working on a 111-day course, I
Yeah.
believe. And for anyone listening that's like, how the heck did Charles do that? And it's really I mean, it's really working. Like your Tao Te Ching course is, I don't know if you want to share numbers or not, but your daily usage on that is listeners on that is mind bending. And yeah, just
I
maybe
can
just
sh-
speaking
yeah,
whatever you want to speak around it.
sure. I can like, would it be of interest, like, to share that? Because that's another kind of ego, that can get involved thing. I noticed with you, I think I feel most comfortable, I guess, to share that because I don't feel like I feel like you genuinely want to know and would be more in a like a celebratory sort of energy. Not to say anyone else wouldn't, but I just like it's a thing that I have to, question my own intentions for sharing that. But I mean, I'd be happy to
I
share
would
that.
love for you, just because people here, if you go look at your Insight Timer courses, the plays that they get or the plays you get per day. I will say I'll be transparent with my course that my best performing course at the moment, which is 21 Days of Morning Inspiration and Motivation, gets about anywhere between 60 to 100 plays a day. And that's like solid. That's solid. I have a sleep course that gets like 30 to 50 a day. My most popular course of all time can fluctuate between 30 and 70, 65. So like if I'm in 100 number a day on a course, I'm like, wow, that was a really good day for this course. And so that's to give a anchor of where I'm at. And now Charles's course on Tao Te Ching Mastery.
Because
Yeah,
that's
share.
where my other courses are too. Like my most successful, second most successful one is in the like 70 would be a good day for that one. But this one, like over the past week or so, it's had several 1,500 play days. Um,
Even he's blowing my mind even when I thought I knew the number. That is so amazing. And it goes to yeah, what do you make of that? Like I have my own ideas around it, but what do you make of that? It's an example. We can take other examples in other industries, right? Of like, hey, you're just working, you're working, you're working, and you find one that just works, right? That just has that extra recipe of like this just working. Yeah, what do you make of its success?
yeah, it's a good question because like a lot of it just kind of feels like the Tao, given a listener's familiarity with the Tao. It's like this incredibly powerful force that if you just kind of get out of the way and like let it happen through you, then there's like some powerful stuff can happen. So it feels like it's an expression. That's kind of my understanding of it, is like there's this really cool thing, the Tao Te Ching, and I've found a way to share it, and then people experience it, and like they have for thousands of years. It's like it's a very effective thing for people to have in their lives. So that's one, that there's just maybe at the core of it, there's a very powerful teaching kind of offering. Um, but then I was also pretty intentional about just wanting to give it the best chance that I could, and my way of doing that was, well, I encourage people to. This was also when we were being paid for comments. I was in the creation of that course, and so I was like, without having it be forced, just try to create the course with that in mind, and just encouraging people to comment as like frequently throughout, not only to ask questions but even to share, like use it as a journal, use it as tell me one line like that stood out to you. Or I might ask people questions in the session and be like, if you're comfortable, share it in a comment, and in the comments, we can respond and with voice comments back to them. So that was pretty successful, I think, at keeping people regularly involved, and maybe helping them feel like they have a personal relationship with me as they go through. And then you can like, you have the fixed content of the course, but then it's almost like an added course when you have this regular connection with the teacher of it. So that's one thing. And I now have like, there's like continues to be many comments, and I keep that as it's like a daily hour of my time to just respond to the comments. So that's a thing. I decided when I released it, I would schedule a live session every week connected to it. So it's like a little space for people to in the course to come to, but also that maybe every week one or two new people see it or more. And so that's been something where like it's a consistent thing. And some people now, they just come every week because it's like it's a thing that has developed. But then, Inside Timer might feature your live session, and then there just so happens to be a large pocket of people coming in, and then there's new people. So I'd say that has like kept it growing, where my other courses pretty much feel fairly stagnant in terms of growth, but this one has continued to grow. And my guess too is I don't know how Inside Timer works in terms of algorithms or like how they choose which courses to show to certain people, but my sense is there's some sort of like viral thing that has happened with this one. I don't know exactly how that would have happened, but it's just like so exponentially has done so exponentially better than my other ones. I just imagine that something has happened where it's like being recommended to people way more than some of these other ones. So it's like a couple thoughts.
Yeah, incredible. I hope you celebrate, Charles. We talk about abundance, right? To hear what Charles's numbers, right? To hear 1,500 plays a day. That's a day. If you got 1,500 a month on a course, I would say you probably had a solid month on that course. But 1,500 a day to really just, I hope listening, if you're on Insight Timer and you're doing meditation courses, to use that as to really celebrate with Charles, to feel that expansion, because that's truly how we expand. And Insight Timer's a platform that is built on that mutual generosity, that mutual celebration of everyone, or maybe not celebration, but thriving of everyone. I know that's definitely the intention. So you have this breakout course, and now you're about to finish 111 days. How has that been different? And I know you're not thinking it's going to be the same. Like I think I'm getting a sense you're letting yourself trust whatever it's going to be. Yeah, like how you feel, and how does one finish a 111-day course?
Yeah, and I can't really tell you yet because I still feel far away from it, although I'm relatively close, and I've done a lot of editing in this one. Like, because the way I was getting through it is I was doing one a day. I would write, record, and edit that day. So I'd be like, okay, I can get this done in a fairly reasonable period of time if I just do one a day. But that was a lot to do all that in a day. But it was manageable. By the end of the day, I could have one, and I was feeling good about that. But then it seems to me that in the creation of a long form project, like inevitably you evolve in the way you're thinking about things or articulating things. And so when I got to like 70 something, and then I was going to go to the Zen monastery that I refer to frequently in the course, and that you went to, but then I got COVID then, and then I was sick for like a couple weeks. It was a pretty intense experience of COVID, and that just threw off. I was already going to take like a couple days break to go to the monastery, but then I had to take like 2 weeks break to get back into the process of recording. And so what I did instead in that time was I started listening back to all the way back to the beginning. That just felt like something to do at that time. And I was like, these first ones, it just didn't feel just didn't feel right about it, like as it related to where I was in the course and the way I was sharing, because I think it had become a lot more kind of economical and like just less and more precise. And so then that led me to be like, I can't just let it go out like this. Like it has to feel just right for me. So then at that point I went back to one, and I didn't re-record anything, but I was just editing basically, and I just removed mainly. I was just like getting rid of stuff that didn't absolutely have to be there. And so then I went back through that, and now I'm kind of like back into the 70s. I've recorded 110 of them. I wanted to leave the last one for like literally being at the end of everything. But yes, it's been definitely taxing, and that's the interesting part of that desire thing too. Like there's a lot of this that I don't like and like don't want to do, but it still feels connected to like the intrinsically meaningful desire. And there's something even right about that, to have a certain pain that it takes to get it, you know, finished and complete. Like that might be inevitable in the completion of a real big, like meaningful project. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's been quite difficult. But I think the sustaining thing is that it's coming from like the center of my circle, I would say. And it's just like something that just feels really inherently meaningful for me to complete. And this is kind of a gauge for me of if I could get to the end and say Insight Timer rejects it, which could happen, I would still be okay with that. Like, and I would find some other avenue, but like the creation of it has felt intrinsically meaningful to me. Also, a thing that has helped me is trying to make something that I want to listen to. Like that's felt really important as a gauge, and like makes it enjoyable for the most part along the way. Because it's like, I would say in the past, like my other courses, many of them, I probably wouldn't want to listen to them. Not that I don't like them, but I was creating them for a particular, you know, person that I had in mind, like that is the listener. And it's like not stuff that I would personally listen to. So that's been something, I don't know if that's useful or helpful. Like that's been an increasingly the gauge of whatever I might be working on or creating. Like, is this something I would want to read or listen to? And like that's the thing. Because I think the Tao Te Ching was maybe the first one where I got close to that. Like I would just want to, I like this style of things. And then it turned out to be like quite successful. So I wonder if that might be something to throw into like what you're creating. Worry less about who you think the audience is or who wants to hear this, and focus more on like, is this something that I would want to engage in or listen to? And that might be the most valuable kind of barometer or compass for the creation. So I kind of meandered there, but
Charles, you are an exemplar of everything I aspire to creatively, and honestly, just as a good human being as well too. Just knowing how you operate and how you show up in your life and the things that you put care and energy to. I'm so glad I know you. I'm so glad I get to call you a friend and spend time with you on a weekly basis and continue to learn from you. And thanks so much for sharing so much wisdom on this podcast. I hope you listening took, yeah, there's so many nuggets in here. I'm excited to attempt to make a title out of this. uh, so maybe Charles, if you have any ideas, well, we could talk about that offline. But yeah, thanks so much for spending the time, man. It was super fun.
yeah, thanks for having me. And like you've also been integral, I would say, to my continual growth, like professionally or career wise or beyond. Like I don't think the Tao Te Ching course probably would exist if not for our group that you initiated. Like, because it came out of that, and so much of my work has come out of that. Like that to me is like really valuable. So thank you for that.
No. Speaking of, I just heard a reminder, probably 10 minutes we have, I get to see Charles again. So we're going to sign off on this podcast. See you all next episode and take care, friends.